Salute, salute. Get this thing started. Let's get it started. Salute, salute, salute. Miss Carolyn, I see you. Lovely, I see you. Rodney in the building. What's going on? What's going on, people? Give me 1 second real quick. Okay, the link is in the chat. The link is in the chat. Okay, so I was asked to do a couple topics, so I figured I'd put them all together, get my viewpoints on them. Also, open up the panel so that way we can hear from some like-minded people, grown-ups. So we're gonna get this thing started here. Let's see here. War and racism. When we talk about war and we talk about racism, of course, there's always gray areas. There's always a difficult or tough conversation because some people have different experiences than others. Rightfully so. You have those people on the far left. Of course, you have the people on the far right. And then you have everyone with their individual experiences saying that I'm right and you're wrong. However, the real question is who's right and who's wrong. And when I say right and wrong, I mean who's correct about how to handle this country's affairs, how to handle this country's economic situation, how to handle this country's racism problem. And should it come from a minority person? Should it come from a Caucasian person? It's like, everyone puts their bid in the hat and says, well, I should be sitting at the seat. I should be a part of the conversation, which is always interesting to me. But today, what I want to do is I really want to have a conversation based on more facts and solutions versus just emotion. So in order to get those facts and solutions, we're going to probably need an update on what exactly is going on so that way we all kind of familiar with where we're at right now so we can move forward. So let me go ahead and get this screen up here. Let's get it started. Let's get this screen up here. Let's see how we're going to do this. I can say theater mode. See what that be like. Hold on, maybe that's not the right one. Okay, that's the right one. So we're going to start off with George Floyd situation.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Breaking news out of Minneapolis. The jury has reached a verdict in the federal trial of those 3 former police officers accused of violating George Floyd's civil rights. The jury found all 3 men guilty of violating Floyd's rights by not providing medical aid and failing to stop their senior officer, Derek Chauvin, from using excessive force. For more on this, I want to bring in ABC's Alex Perez on the phone in St. Paul. Also, former homicide prosecutor and defense attorney Bernarda Villalona for more. Bernarda, let's start with you. Are you surprised by the verdict?
I'm not surprised by the verdict because it was plain for all of us to see that you didn't need training, police training, to determine that George Floyd was crying out and was an immediate necessity of some kind of medical attention. So I'm not surprised. I'm glad that the jury arrived to the right verdict. They now have called these 3 former Minnesota police officers guilty because they are guilty for the rights of George Floyd.
Alex, you have covered this case top to bottom for a year and a half now. What does a verdict like this mean for the Floyd family and also the people of Minneapolis?
Well, you know, Kara, the Floyd family has, of course, been following every single legal step very, very carefully. And this is what they wanted. They wanted to see a jury return a guilty verdict. Now, I want to dive in a little bit into what we're seeing happen. This jury made this decision in about 13 hours. They deliberated for about 13 hours. Testimony went for almost a month. So this decision came relatively quickly, Kira, and they had some complicated instructions before them. The jury instructions were about 38 pages, so they had a lot of things to go through here. And many thought the prosecutor really kind of faced an uphill battle here with these civil rights charges because she had to prove that these officers willfully chose their actions. But while some thought it was an uphill battle, it seems the jury agreed with the prosecutor here. Now, just a quick reminder, we're talking about those other officers who were on the scene when George Floyd was murdered, and that's Officer Tou Thao. He's the one that was seen sort of corralling the crowd, keeping them away from George Floyd and the other officers. And then the two former officers, J. Alexander King and Thomas Lane, those are the two former officers seen sort
I think, Rodney, you make a good point. Let's look at this. Rodney says the problem with this is the police have the idea that they are like the military, but they do not get military training, nor do they follow any type of military rules of engagement. Let's talk about it. Cool, Ralph. I appreciate that. Salute to everybody in the chat. We're gonna slow walk this thing. Now, Rodney, you're right. Just here in Texas alone, especially in the Houston area, there are all types of jobs on LinkedIn, Indeed, and a lot of other websites in regards to beefing up the prison system, the sheriff department, and the police department. So, and what's so interesting is how fast these guys go through training and what exactly these guys are learning. And when I say guys, I mean, you know, males and females, but what exactly they're learning in that training. So, you know, I noticed that a lot of times when you have police and they go into a certain area, let's just say you're from the suburbs and you have those policemen go into urban environments where they're dealing with people they're not accustomed to dealing with. You're always going to probably have a sense of being on high alert, and you're always going to have to most people, how they adapt is by becoming the aggressor. You know, most people, you know, most policemen, how they adapt, they become the aggressor because they're dealing with an environment that they're not used to. So they can't go in there on some, you know, I'm gonna be timid. I'm gonna act afraid. So what they do, most become very aggressive, which is why you have such an abundance of frustration when it comes to the police. So I noticed that that's one of the problems. You have people sort of police up a community that they're not from and that they don't understand. The closest they've ever got to that community is on TV. So sometimes when you're face to face with those situations, you then, you know what I'm saying, you tend to act a certain type of way. But yeah, that's a good point, Rodney. Very good point.
At George Floyd's legs and back. Now, all three were charged with failing to help George Floyd when he needed medical help, and King and Thao were charged with failing to stop Chauvin. Now, what we saw in this case, Kira, all three of them took the witness stand in their own defense, and all three of them squarely pointed the finger at Chauvin, saying he took over the scene, and they weren't aware of how serious the situation was when it came to George Floyd and his life. But clearly the jury here, Kira, not buying that argument, finding them guilty on all charges against them, federal charges here, Kira.
Clearly, Bernarda, prosecutors did a great job arguing that the officers had every opportunity to stop and help.
Exactly, Kara. You got to think this is not a situation that just lasted a couple of seconds. We're not talking about a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes. We are talking about 9 minutes and 29 seconds where Derek Chauvin was on the neck of George Floyd with people in the crowd crying and screaming for help for the officers to do something. How many times did we hear the bystanders say, Tutal, you're not going to do anything? You're not going to do anything? He's not breathing. He's not moving. And that put all of those officers on notice about the desperate need of medical attention that George Floyd needed, and also a reason to stop Derek Chauvin from taking away the life of George Floyd.
Bernarda, Alex, thank you both.
Hi, everyone.
So you know what was interesting about this whole George Floyd situation? Of course, it's a travesty. Rodney, I appreciate what you said. Let me put this on the screen. I'll try to be more politically correct here. Let me get back to this. Rodney says, we have to watch how we say urban environment, because they also there's also a thing called urban warfare. I got you. I appreciate that. So let's get back to this. You know, I noticed about this situation with George Floyd. It's yeah, me. This is definitely a situation that brings back some feelings or whatever. So we're gonna get into it. Here's my situation, you know, my issue with this George Floyd thing. What bothers me is that I've never heard so many people talk about someone's criminal history. Like, basically breaking down, if you have a criminal history, you don't deserve fair and impartial treatment. And it's like, to me, it's like, it's disgusting and it's unfortunate. It's crazy. It's like, when you die, I have to find out if you had a police record. I have to find out, you know, if you were a perfect person. And I think that's the issue that I had with Candace Owens. I did a very I did a that's early tough love days. I did a very intense response to Candace Owens. It wasn't disrespectful, but it was like, how dare you? You know, it's crazy to think that somebody would say, well, he was a criminal, so we don't need to mourn him. He was a criminal, so we don't need to treat him with respect. And I just felt like this is crazy. It seems like, to be honest with you, it seems like that way with all of the deaths. It's like, well, they were criminals. The Jacob Blake, the Ahmaud Arbery, the George Floyd, the Dante Wright, like everyone, like all of these people are saying they were criminals. Why do we give a damn? Why do we care? And it's like, man, that could have been you. You know, you're telling me that you live a perfect life. You ain't got no traffic tickets. You know what I'm saying? You know, you graduated on time. And I feel so. I appreciate y'all hitting the like button. Thank you very much. But the fact of the matter is, it's sad, because we've come to a time right now, especially with situations that, you know, when something happens to you, we have to look at your criminal record before we respond. That's some scary shit. That is some scary shit. We have to look at your criminal record before we respond, before we render aid. There are numerous people in that George Floyd situation that said, hey, man, hey, that is wrong. You know, and I don't know if you guys know, but I started the 2020 Bystanders Act, and that was also adopted into a bill. So that's awesome. You know, that was awesome. You know what I'm saying? So, but the fact of the matter is, and the Bystander Act basically, it allows you to intervene safely in immediate danger. And it kind of breaks down some other stipulations too, or whatever case it be. So it took some research to do that. So that was actually adopted into another bill. And it was some big bill, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'll definitely get that information. But the fact of the matter is, it's sad that, you know, you have to be a perfect person and nothing in your background in order to get justice. And I think that's what made a lot of people upset, because I'm gonna be honest with you, when you see yourself in this situation, you're saying, well, would I get justice? Would I be the one to get justice? You know, would I be the one they say on television with Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum be like, hey, they don't deserve justice because they didn't live a good life? What if they start looking at, you know, your kids, they didn't live a good life, so that makes you bad parents, so you don't deserve justice? Let's get some of these comments on the screen here. You're exactly right. So a man is a drug addict. He is considered a criminal. In that case, there are a whole lot of criminals that wear that suit. But here's the thought process. Suppose you're a recovering alcoholic or a drug addict. Hell, suppose you were homeless. Suppose you had an issue where you got arrested for some type of petty crime. And the way these people were talking about George Floyd and others who've passed away by some type of police brutality, it was despicable. It was despicable. I believe that these officers should have thorough training, and I also believe that these officers should be put in situations that are very realistic, so you can see how they respond. Everybody ain't good under pressure. Come on now. Everybody ain't good under pressure. And I think what's really sad about it is we're in a situation where everybody don't want to do the job. Uh-oh. Come on now. How many men and women do we know, you know what I'm saying, that we're going to complain about it, but we ain't going to do nothing about it. We're not going to do the job. Come on, 9 to 5. I ain't trying to deal with no hard-headed people. Come on now. Nobody wants to be the peacemaker. Nobody wants to carry the burden of the badge. Forget a civic duty. I'm just trying to do my own duty. I'm trying to do my own doo-doo. You know? Candace Owens is a puppet. I get it. Listen, I get it. I understand. Her a puppet. We calling her a coon. We calling her. But here's the thought process. At the end of the day, how come we don't have more people wanting to say, well, let me join the force, so that way we could be on the side where when the policing starts, we can have more people with common sense. It just seems ironic that it's like we don't want to do it, but we don't want nobody else to do it either. And when I say we, I'm talking about as people, as citizens, not just black people. This is not just a black conversation. This is a citizen conversation. This is an adult conversation. This is a tough conversation. Mm-hmm. Somebody might say, well, what makes it so tough? Well, what makes it so tough is because now, instead of choosing facts, we choose sides. Instead of choosing facts, we choose sides. And when we start choosing sides, that's a good question. Me says, how much training do police have? Well, we kind of touched on that a little bit. I mean, here's a thought process. When you're doing things in groves, when you're doing things in masses, like I said, here in Houston, we're beefing up the police force, on a whole front. Like they throwing money at, people to become correction officers and police and sheriffs. So, I've definitely seen it, I've definitely seen it. And the thought process, is how much training are they getting? I actually looked at some of the police videos in reference to the schools and stuff like that or whatever. And it's just interesting to me because I'm like, these people, I'm sure they're not from any type of rough areas. They're not from any type of rough areas. I think so. It depends on the Ant Dog. What's going on? Salute. It could be about 6 weeks. I think it depends on what exactly you're doing. What exactly you're doing. I think there's a state requirement. So yeah, state, federal. Yeah. But it's I'm telling you, they're pushing those guys through. I actually met a young cadet who was joining the police force or whatever, and she said, hey, I want to become a detective and all of that great stuff, whatever, young black female, whatever. And she was really excited, she was really excited. And we were sitting down, we was talking about training or whatever case would be, and I asked her a question, and I said, why would you want to become a policeman? And she said, I really want to make a difference, and I said, well, what's going to happen when you get into a George Floyd situation? And she said, I won't know what to do until it happens. And my thought process is, shouldn't we be training for that? Shouldn't that be a part of the training? Like you cannot go through this George Floyd situation and not say, okay, well, we need to add training that is about if another officer is doing something, we need to intervene. We can't just wait until the officer, does what they do and causes bodily harm or death, and then say, well, after the fact. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, out of those 3 officers with the George Floyd situation, all of them should have been held equally accountable. You didn't do nothing. So now they're blaming it on one guy, talking about, well, he did everything. You could have been pushed him off of him. You could have did something, but you did nothing. Let's get into our next thing. I appreciate the comments. I'm gonna open up this panel in a minute. Exactly. Most of those officers don't even know the law. Yeah, and you know what? Before we get to the next thing, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. I mean, the thing about it is, they can't just roll up on you and just say, "Oh, get out your car and do X, Y, and Z." Of course, it got to be probable cause, but I mean, you have the right to ask. I think I'm gonna tell you right now. I think it's a level of ignorance, not only with whoever the law enforcement is, but also with the citizens. You don't know your rights. You don't. Instead of looking at YouTube videos, breaking down, pure pondering what's going on, instead of looking at YouTube videos breaking down your rights, you don't. So that's why you get got. People can't just come running in your house. They need a warrant. You know what I'm saying? So you have to look at something besides craziness and nonsense. And I think that's one of the biggest problems is that, what I'm saying, most of these guys, don't know. Don't know. Let's go. You're right. If we stand by and watch without saying anything to try to stop it, we are just as guilty. You know what the issue is, pure pondering? Let me tell you what it is. Salute, Rodney. I work, you work for the sheriff department. But here's the thing. Here's the issue. The issue is, pure pondering. People don't like to get involved in situations of that magnitude. You know what I'm saying? Like your regular everyday thing, they figure, hey, the police officers, they're on the side of right. There's nothing I can do as a citizen. There's nothing I can say or whatever. It's very few people that jump into a situation that say, hey, stop. This is nonsense. This is going too far. Come on, man. We see that everywhere. We see that right here on YouTube. It's like, this is going too far. This is absurd. This is nonsense. You know what I'm saying? So there's not too many people that's going, and what's sad about it, suppose this was a real life situation. Suppose it was an officer sitting on your neck and people were just sitting by, saying, well, I hope you make it through that. I hope you get over that. I hope you get through that. I'm going to let God handle it. You know what I'm saying? And here's the thing, when you have citizens who intervene, the thought process is, this is based on logic and common sense. A lot of people are not logical enough to use their common sense. So when you have people now, if you have people just jumping in the way of law enforcement or whatever case be, that right there could be a problem. Because now, instead of arresting the person, let's say you go to somebody's house. It's probable cause. You got a warrant or whatever case may be. So you got a warrant for somebody's arrest. Say somebody's boyfriend, and that person has family members at their house. Okay. So then you got the 2 policemen or 3 policemen. They go in the house to serve the warrant or whatever case be, and try to arrest the guy. But now you got people saying, "Oh no, you're not going to arrest my son or you're not going to arrest my boyfriend." So now they intervene because they don't like the fact that the officers are being a little bit rough with their son or with their boyfriend, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the thing: maybe the officers are not being rough. maybe that person is just resisting arrest. So now you got to have logic to say, well, is this a logical, reasonable arrest? And I'm gonna be honest with you, when it comes to people's common sense, when it comes to people doing the right thing, I'm a little skeptical. I think it'll be more people jumping in situations where they shouldn't be involved versus jumping into situations and intervening when they should. That's just how I feel. Let's I really just want to be putting your comments on the screen. Some good questions, some good statements. You're right. People are afraid to get involved. It is dangerous to get in. Yeah, definitely, because you don't want to get shot. I mean, that's the end result. I mean, some people scared to death to go to jail, but they definitely don't want to get shot. Can you imagine getting shot in the ass trying to help trying to help somebody? People be trying to go home. You know, on social media, you can hide a little bit. You know, you might give your some people are scared to give their opinion about negativity on social media. You think they're going to jump in a situation where police are armed and considered dangerous? Come on, man. No, they're not. Let's be real. You know, let's be real. Let's get to this next one.
Hearing the first two verdicts in this case, Ahmaud Arbery, hate crimes, Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael having been found guilty of hate crimes in this case. They're still reading through the charges, and I'm going to continue to listen. But Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael have been found guilty of hate crimes against Ahmaud Arbery. They deprived him of his use of a public street because of his race. I'm going to listen for count two. That is against William Roddy Bryan, but again, two guilty verdicts in this hate crimes trial so far. I'm going to stand by. A guilty verdict for William Roddy Bryan as well. So the primary charges in this case carrying a life sentence, hate crimes against charges against Ahmaud Arbery, against Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, William Roddy Bryan, all guilty of hate crimes according to this unanimous verdict by this, after fewer than 4 hours of deliberations, reaching this case that has
I have never seen nobody do this. Like, didn't have the information while they were reporting it. I've never seen that before.
So on the charge of kidnapping, that's the third count. All three have been found guilty as well, and I'm continuing to listen to court.
Salute to everybody in the chat. I'm
Count
gonna
four is a firearms
open up
charge.
the panel in a minute.
Travis McMichael has been found guilty of that fourth count of the firearms charge. That is a brandishing and discharging a firearm in the commission of a violent crime. They're continuing to read, and now we're on count five. This is the Greg McMichael firearms charge. So guilty on all five counts. We now have a verdict in this hate crimes trial against three men who've been accused since almost right after they were indicted in the state case for murder, have now been convicted of hate crimes in this federal case. Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, William Roddy Bryan, all convicted of depriving Ahmaud of his civil rights because of his race. This case, again, all about the race of the victim, Ahmaud Arbery, 24-year-old, who was running through their Satilla Shores neighborhood almost 2 years to the day, February 23rd, 2020. They chased Ahmaud Arbery. They ultimately murdered Ahmaud Arbery, as a state court found late last year. So the murder was at the state level. This was the federal hate crimes trial of these three men, and today they have been found guilty, convicted by a jury unanimously.
I don't want too much to play before I, give my little take or whatever. I'm gonna drop this link. I think it's important. I'm gonna drop this link in the chat. If you guys want to come and join the conversation, feel free to join the conversation. But I'm gonna give my take on this. Ahmaud Arbery. The same thing that I discussed about George Floyd, how we weaponized his background, and that was more important. His background was more important than what was happening presently. I think that anyone said I need to get a background check on you before your death matters. I think that's some sad shit. I think really that's some sad shit. Are there bad people out there? Yes. Are there people out there that hurt children? Yes. Are there people out there that abuse other people? Yes. I think we perceive. I think we every situation on a case by case basis. I do believe that there are some things that can be overlooked. If you got 15 traffic tickets, I wouldn't call you a bad person. Okay? If you didn't pay all your, I wouldn't call you a bad person. I think now when we start saying, I would come to your aid, but I would help you, but when you start allowing people to make excuses on why they won't support you or why they don't hold you to a standard, I think that's this whole but thing. I would do it, but. And I think Ahmaud Arbery, I think it was a hate crime. I think these gentlemen took matters into their own hands. I think that they called the police at the wrong time. And I think that they really felt powerful grabbing a weapon, hopping in a vehicle, chasing this guy down. And this is when we go back to common sense. Hey, they intervened. They seen someone running through the neighborhood. They felt like, hey, this was the guy that was, snooping around people's property, et cetera, et cetera. So they said, man, hell no, not my property, not where we live at. We're gonna do something about it. We're gonna do a citizen arrest. We're gonna take this criminal down. We're gonna question him. And again, it's two vehicles, and it's three men versus one guy. So imagine being the mother or the father or the family member or the friend of Ahmaud Arbery, watching him for over 2 years, the clip of him getting shot, getting chased down, all because they say, well, we think that he was on property he didn't belong to. This is my thing. If I step on property I don't belong, and I'm just, I'm a young guy, what I'm saying? I'm looking around. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. When I was little, I used to go to I used to, of course, I used to run it a lot too, but I used to go to the better neighborhood. And I always used to look at these big houses and doing the construction or whatever. I used to go inside the big houses and pretend like, wow, look at this. And I used to imagine myself being in those houses. I'm gonna be honest with you. When you grow up with a certain level of poverty, you grow up with a certain level of not having, you are amazed at certain. Like I used to sneak on car lots and look at cars and be like, yeah, I would drive this one. Oh yeah, this is my favorite color right here. And it wasn't that I was trying to be mischievous. It wasn't that I was trying to break in no cars. It was just, man, just to be close, just to be able to touch it. And I think that nostalgia, I think a lot of people they're not accustomed to that, familiar with that, especially if they're used to things. When you're used to things, you ever take kids out of project, out of public housing, and you take them like to a zoo, or you take them to a museum, or you take them to an amusement park, the nostalgia they get when they pull up, the nostalgia that they get when they see the rides, or eating popcorn or cotton like that, it's a big thing. It's a big thing. They said Ahmaud Arbery, hey, he should not have been running in that neighborhood. They don't want him in that neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. But I can imagine, can you imagine a lakeside view with nice homes and well manicured grass? Huh? No trash on the street. I can imagine that. I definitely can imagine that. I definitely can imagine, just being in the moment, being in the time. And it's sad that it was a lot of people saying, well, Ahmaud Arbery was trespassing, so he deserved to die. George Floyd had a bad record, so he deserved to die. It's sad, but these are the things that we have to deal with. These are the things that we have to deal with, and more. What's more thought provoking is these are the things that you send your children into the world that have to deal with. They have to combat this type of nonsense. They have to combat this type of nonsense. And I really feel like if we don't take the time to have conversations like this, we don't take the time to promote some type of corrective action. Mm-hmm. We don't take the time to say, hey, if this happens, this is going to be the recourse for it. Just something to think about.
12 jurors found that they did, in fact, deprive Ahmaud Arbery of his civil rights because he was a black man. So this case has been obviously a big life in Brunswick here now for 2 years. We expect the family of Ahmaud Arbery will be coming out shortly and speaking, and when that happens, we'll obviously turn it over to the podium here behind me. It'll probably be a minute or two to wrap up what's happening in court. A very formal setting up there. They typically don't just open the doors and let people out, so it'll probably be a few minutes of delay. Then we have a verdict in this hate crimes trial here in Brunswick, Georgia. 3 men accused of hate crimes against a 24-year-old black man who was killed in their neighborhood by them 2 years ago have now been found guilty of hate crimes. These crimes carry a life sentence. That sentence is in addition to the life sentence that they received for murdering Ahmaud Arbery in state court. There were a lot of questions about whether this hate crimes trial would be successful or if it was duplicative, but in fact, a lot of testimony came out at this trial that did not come out at this state trial. A lot of people believe the prosecutor in that state case chose not to focus on race, but instead just focus on the act that immediately that led to the death of Ahmaud Arbery, and not what the men's racial biases or motives may have been. It's been an issue since the beginning. There were allegations that didn't come up in either case that standing over the body of Ahmaud Arbery, Travis McMichael had uttered a racial slur. That allegation had come from one of his co-defendants, and because his co-defendant didn't testify, that could not come in. It would have been hearsay in any other format. So that particular piece did not come in. But during this case, the trial, prosecutors introduced a day of evidence, basically showcasing hateful, vitriolic language that these men used against African American, the demeaning ways in which they view.
Prophet. I don't know. I heard so many things, man, because I was really heavily just kind of following everything that, what I'm saying. But after a while, after that they're gonna eventually go to trial and all that good stuff or whatever, you try to emotionally dump it, so that way you ain't got, because I'm gonna be honest with you, there are some good police officers out there. There are some good citizens out there, and it's unfortunate that there are bad apples out there. It's unfortunate that there are bad apples out there, and those bad apples definitely impact, the things around us. There's no way in hell, there's no way in hell that these officers thought that what they were doing was legit. There's no way in hell that salute Big E. There's no way that these officers thought, you know what I'm saying, that watching one of their fellow officers, whether he was senior to them or not, you kneel on a grown man's neck or a neck of a person. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what type of physics, trigonometry, geometry, algebra, subtraction, or addition, but if you put a grown man's back behind their put their arms behind their back and you kneel on them, it is very difficult to get up. So here's my thought process. So your arms are behind your back, right? We're kneeling on your back and we're on your legs. What does his got to do with anything? Is anybody want to discuss that? let's be real. What is his controlling his neck? What is that about to do? Unless he was banging his head on the ground, unless he was vomiting and wouldn't turn to the side so that way he could, get the vomit out or whatever. But what does kneeling on his neck have to do with anything? And how combatant can he be if he's already down? You already got him, his hands behind his back. And it's almost like we don't know how